story. Then again, does Devin Nunes. The explosive exchange that has some wondering, where is all of this going? Oh yeah, and we forgot, are you ready for a government shutdown? It could be only days away. The one guy in Capitol Hill doing his darndest to make sure it doesn't happen. House Ways and Means Chief Kevin Brady. And is a border wall really worth shutting down the U.S. government? Former acting ICE Chief Tom Homan says, damn right it is. An apology not accepted? An MSNBC host still taking heat for a comment about Secretary of State Mike Pompeo that even some liberals thought over the top. Count U.S. Ambassador to Germany Rick Grenell offended too, and he's here to explain why today. Then I want you to meet the Chief of Staff. For now, is Budget Director Mick Mulvaney just the kind of messenger the president needs right now?
We can ask the question right now, are you better off than you were a year ago? And the answer is yes. And there's one reason for that, and it's Donald Trump.
Why this numbers guy, this budget guy, could be just the guy at a critical time for the top guy. Happy weekend, guys. Oh, yeah, and gals. We're happy that you're with us for the very, very latest. Get ready. The next 2 hours of Cavuto Live starts right now. It looks like the president has a new chief of staff for the time being. It's going to be Mick Mulvaney at a crucial juncture for the president. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto. Let's get right to it on the day that we're learning that Ryan Zinke is going to be stepping down as the Interior Secretary of the United States. So it doesn't slow down at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Let's go to Ellison Barber, who's there right now. Hey, Ellison.
Hi, Neil. Yeah, no such thing as a slow Saturday here. Secretary Zinke is someone who is known as being an important figure in this administration's environmental policies and quite a few rollbacks associated with it, particularly when it comes to things like public lands. He's faced a number of ethical questions of late and a number of federal investigations into some of his actions. Over the summer, the Interior Department's Inspector General launched an investigation into a real estate deal that involved a foundation set up by Secretary Zinke and a development group backed by the chairman of Halliburton, one of the world's largest oil field service companies. The IG reportedly referred that to the Department of Justice. President Trump says the administration is going to announce the new Secretary of the Interior sometime next week. The president did not say whether Zinke resigned or was fired, only that he, quote, will be leaving the administration at the end of the year after having served for a period of almost 2 years. The president said Zinke accomplished a lot over the course of those 2 years and thanked him for his service to our nation. All of this, of course, comes on the heels of another staff change. Exactly 1 week ago, the president announced that his chief of staff would leave at the end of the year. The president's top choice to replace him did not come to fruition. Other reported top choices took themselves out of the running. Mr. Trump announced that his budget director, Mick Mulvaney, will take on the role as acting chief of staff. He also appeared to try and tamp down some rumors that people simply did not want the job, tweeting this, Neil, quote, for the record, there were many people who wanted to be the White House chief of staff. Mick M. will do a great job. Now, since after the 2016 midterms, we have had departures here from the Attorney General, the Chief of Staff, and now the Department of Interior. Neil.
All right. Thank you very, very much, Ellison. Meanwhile, the fallout after Special Counsel Bob Mueller submits documents about exactly what happened in the exchanges that he had and his staff had with Michael Flynn. Let's get the latest on that with Fox News correspondent Garrett Tenney. Hey, Garrett.
Hey, Neil, in those documents, the special counsel really pushes back against accusations that the FBI acted improperly in an interview with Michael Flynn. Flynn's legal team claims the FBI discouraged him from bringing an attorney to his January 2016 interview with FBI agents at the White House, and that interview was the basis for charges against him that he lied to the FBI. These newly released documents confirm those claims and those that the agents never informed Flynn that lying to them was a crime. As a report known as a 302 of that meeting, it states, before the interview, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and others decided the agents would not warn Flynn that it was a crime to lie during an FBI interview because they wanted Flynn to be relaxed and they were concerned giving the warnings might adversely affect rapport. Now, prosecutors argue that as the former head of an intelligence agency, the retired lieutenant general shouldn't have needed to be warned that it's a crime to lie to the FBI, and that even though agents agents didn't believe Flynn was lying at the time, it doesn't change the fact that he did lie about his contacts with Russia's ambassador. Flynn is scheduled to be sentenced on Tuesday, but it's possible with these new filings that the judge could delay that hearing. The special counsel's office has recommended no jail time, though, due to his cooperation. Neil?
Gary, thank you very, very much. All right, from Michael Flynn to one Michael Cohen, the president's former top lawyer. I asked Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, who sits on the Judiciary Committee, what he makes of all of this.
Violating the law. But from Trump's point of view, he's done non-disclosure agreements before to protect his family and his brand. So
I don't know. That's what he did here.
I don't know, but I know this. It ain't got a damn thing to do with Russia. And I'm not saying, I'm not excusing it, but we're talking about sex. We're talking about Stormy Daniels, Michael Avenatti, and a Playboy Bunny as your chief witnesses. Now, if you want to make that the centerpiece of 2019, be my guest.
All right, so help me with this, Senator. One of the things that's come up, and Rudy Giuliani, the president's lawyer, had said, he insists that he did not say, when he was earlier reported to have said that hush money payments aren't a big deal. But if Donald Trump did initiate or did tell Michael Cohen to write those checks, would that be a big deal to you?
Well, it'd be a campaign finance violation in theory. Campaign finance violations have never been used to impeach anybody. Obama failed to report $8 million worth of contributions, and he got a fine. So I'm just saying, what's the big deal to me? Did Trump collude with the Russians? And if he didn't, I'll put everything else in perspective. If you want to impeach the president over the Stormy Daniels thing, you can if you choose to. We tried this with Clinton. It started out with some bad business deals. Sexual harassment lawsuits are always about sex. You don't want the most important person in the world, the president, undermining the legal system. That's what it was about to me. If you think that this is worthy of impeachment in the House, go ahead. I think most Americans probably won't agree with you.
Do you believe everything the president has said on these subjects?
No. I don't, no. You know, he's always under siege. You know, he's saying this one minute and that the next. It's what he does that matters. He's like every other person. You know, Bill Clinton lied about having sexual relationships with that woman. I voted against that article of impeachment because I think most people, blindsided, would lie to protect their family.
All right, let's get the read on this from this fellow. You know him very, very well, the former Whitewater Independent Counsel, Robert Ray. Robert, very good to have you.
Good morning.
Let's go over here. So I need your legal expertise, sir. And the first is on the hush payments with Michael Cohen and all of that. Michael Cohen said the president authorized them, and that's a problem. What do you think?
Well, as Lindsey Graham said, that may be a problem in theory, but prosecutors don't bring cases about theories. They bring cases they expect to win. And this is a situation in which you have the former FEC chairman, or at least one former FEC chairman, saying he doesn't even think this is an expenditure under the campaign finance laws. I think,
especially if campaign funds weren't used, right?
Right. Well, look, and you know, you imagine him being an expert witness at a trial. Let's just say if this all played out, I don't think any responsible prosecutor would bring a criminal felony case over this. I really don't.
Do you think it could be used, though, in concert with other things? I know originally Rudy Giuliani had said that hush money payments are no big deal. He dialed that back a little bit, but it depends on whether they, in this particular case, whether campaign funds or not, were part of trying to influence the election outcome, you say?
I think that's a problematic theory for all the reasons that, you know, FEC experts have pointed out. I think that's a difficult one for all the reasons also that we found out in the Senator Edwards prosecution. You know, it's in theory a violation. I think the president is correct that even if in theory it's a violation, ordinarily these things would be handled civilly. And I really think that there's a, you know, awful lot of wishful thinking on the other side about trying to make this out into a felony violation of law committed by the president, when just because Michael Cohen pleaded guilty to, it doesn't mean, and even if it was at the president's direction, you have to show that the president had the intent to violate the campaign finance laws. And even if Michael Cohen thought it was a violation of the federal campaign finance laws, that doesn't necessarily mean, unless they had a discussion, and neither the president says it happens, nor frankly, if you listen carefully, does Michael Cohen say it happened, where Michael Cohen provided advice to the president, you know, Mr. President, or I guess Mr. Trump at that stage,
right.
If we do this, this is a violation of campaign finance laws, and the president then says, I don't care about that, I want you to do it anyway. I don't think that conversation ever happened.
And that's what the president has said. He told our Harris Faulkner that I never told him to do anything illegal.
Exactly. Right. And unless a prosecutor before a jury in a criminal case can convince a jury unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt that happened, they lose. Prosecutors, responsible prosecutors, don't bring cases that they can't win. And I think this is such a situation. I think Lindsey Graham is entirely correct. In theory, this is a violation, and that's about as far as it goes.
All right, let's switch over to Michael Flynn. You know, his lawyers are telling the judge involved in this case that he was essentially set up. Do you think he was?
I think that if I were the President of the United States and I found out after the fact that Jim Comey snuck 2 agents into the White House, unbeknownst to the White House counsel and the White House chief of staff, in order to ask Michael Flynn questions about which investigators already knew the answers to because they had the transcript, and I found out that that happened later on, that itself alone would have been cause to fire the FBI director. And I don't know what was going on here, but what I do know is it looks like they were trying to gain additional information to be used to try to get Michael Flynn out of the national security job. And then after those statements were made, of course, we know with the rest of the story, Sally Yates then went to the White House counsel and say, hey, you got a problem with Michael Flynn because he hasn't told the truth, and the Russians could use this to out him or threaten to out him.
Well, she wasn't satisfied with the way they handled it
right.
themselves, right?
Yeah, so you know, my take on all that is I don't know what was going on, and I don't know Michael Flynn personally, but they were out to get him. Now,
but he did lie.
Well, right, and so, you know, I think I disagree with some people that, like, well, that's entrapment. It's not legal entrapment, and I also agree that, you know, there's no question that Michael Flynn and someone in his position should know better and knows the consequences of not telling the truth to an FBI agent. So I don't condone the conduct, and I'm not trying to excuse it, but I do know that it was a trap for the unwary, and I do know if someone like Jim Comey had pulled a stunt like that in my administration, that would have been cause to get rid of him.
Interesting. All right, Robert, thank you very much. Robert Ray, the former Whitewater special prosecutor. In the meantime, are we getting ever so close now to a government shutdown? The read from House Ways and Means chair for the time being, Kevin Brady. And then there is the drama over what's happening half a world away. Our allies across the globe are in a world of hurt. Why our ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell, says he knows exactly why.
I'm Ray.
Days of the United States government, it would be the third under this president. These have actually happened dozens of times, but maybe people are getting used to it and they're not making a big deal of it. But our next guest is worried about it just the same. The House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady. Chairman, very good to have you. The administration seems to say this is worth the fight. The funding for the wall, the $5 billion that he's requesting, is definitely worth the fight. Do you think it is? In other words, that this is worth shutting down the government to get it?
You know, the fight for national border security specifically is the right one to have. Look, no one believes our borders are secure, and, you know, crossings, illegal crossings are up dramatically from a year ago, and these are dangerous elements. So I don't think there's any question about that. Look, I'm not a fan of government shutdowns. I don't think they achieve anything. I think, you know, Leader Schumer found this out when he did this earlier this year, how unpopular it is. But here's a couple things. I think, one, the president, you know, has come down dramatically from his $25 billion request for this border wall to $5 billion and agreeing to do it in increments. I think that's important. The big questions here, I think the incoming Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, is in a pickle. Democrats who beat Republicans pledged to run a centrist government solution-oriented Washington. But for her to become Speaker, she's really sort of sold her soul to the most extreme elements in order to get these final votes. And so she's really, I think, in a pickle in trying to figure out how she can reach a compromise with the president here.
If we do have a shutdown, and with many of your colleagues in the House not coming back until, I think, Wednesday, how long do you think it lasts?
I hope not long, and I hope it doesn't happen at all. And I really don't think it needs to. And I know this from the White House. Look, the president's been insistent our border is not secure. He's exactly right. And I think he's given ground. So in order to try to reach a solution, I hope that continues to be the way. But I do think it takes both parties to try to find some common ground here. And I hope she reaches out and Leader Schumer understands that it didn't work out well for them either. So let's find a common ground. Let's find a solution that secures our border.
Sir, while you're here, your old colleague and friend, Mick Mulvaney, the budget director, former congressman, is now going to be the acting chief of staff. We stress acting because it could turn out to be longer than that. A number apparently turned down this job. It is a pressure cooker job, but what do you think?
Look, Mick Mulvaney is really an outstanding individual. I served with Mick, obviously, in Congress, worked together a lot on budget, tax reform, other issues as well. He is a tireless worker. He's no baloney here. I mean, he says it the way it is. I think that's why the president likes him. I think he also can, frankly, handle, as we know, a number of tasks at one time. So he's got a lot of the skills that are needed for that position. I'm glad he stepped forward to it. It's not an easy job. It never is. But you need good people stepping forward. I'm glad Mick's doing that.
Do you think the president will listen to anyone, though?
I do think the president listens. Look, he juggles a lot of things. He's, he has strong feelings and opinions anyway. But I know my experience with him, while he doesn't always agree on issues, for example, on trade, we have disagreements. Right. Nonetheless, he does listen. He does process it. He may come to a different conclusion, but that's okay, too. All
right. I think we might have gotten an indication, sir, why the administration zeroed in on Mick Mulvaney. Sarah Sanders might have tipped her hand when she said, I think he brought, referring to Mulvaney, a lot of structure to the White House that was needed at the time he came in, and has certainly, I think, been an incredible addition to the White House. That being said, I think the president is looking for somebody that believes in what we are doing and believes in the policies that we spend all day, every single day, looking to implement. She was actually referring at the outset there to John Kelly, the outgoing chief of staff, and I got a sense from that in the beginning that she was talking about maybe general, it wasn't a team player. Do you feel that was the case?
I'll tell you, I'm not in the White House. I know, in the areas that I intersect the most on tax reform, on trade, on economic issues, he's been just terrific and helped put together, facilitate some meetings for the president to be able to listen, whether it's to manufacturers or farmers or others. And so, look, my experience,
country and much of Europe is going to take to combat climate change. It is not helping matters any, though. There are a lot of workers who feel that the powers that be are ignoring them. I want to raise this right now with our ambassador to Germany, Rick Grinnell, who joins us right now. There's a bit of a delay on our feed here, so you might notice that a little bit. I apologize to you and certainly to the ambassador. Ambassador, very good to have you. It seems like much of Europe can't get out of its own way. These protests seem to get, on and on and on. What do you make of them?
Well, clearly there's a lot of dissatisfaction in France. There's a lot of dissatisfaction in the UK and even here in Germany. But I think that they're for different reasons. Every single country and the people within those countries are voicing their concern about different issues. I think that's okay. I think democracies and leadership go through a time of change. Certainly here in Germany, Chancellor Merkel has been around for 14 years, and I think That's a long time, and people are looking for new policies. In France, I think it's clear that we can't have protectionist policies. We've got to have free and fair trade and trade policies. We got to believe in capitalism. And I think that people don't want to take the brunt of policy programs that are clearly not geared towards them. And so there's dissatisfaction that arises. As long as these are peaceful demonstrations, certainly that's what we want to see. And we see them throughout Europe, and we see them throughout the United States. So I don't think it's anything new.
Ambassador, if you don't mind my switching gears, Mika Brzezinski, an MSNBC host, has since apologized for disparaging remarks she made about the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, and his allegiance to Saudi Arabia, saying that he was a wannabe dictator's butt boy. She has since said that those words were wrong. She went on to say that it was vulgar. I knew it right away, tweeted that it was a terrible choice of words, that I was sorry. Please allow me to say this face to face when she got on the program. You were incensed at the comments in the first place, saying that accepting apologies is important. We all fail. But I don't see that you've actually apologized to gays. She came back and then did cite the overall LGBTQ community and colleagues for using it and using the words, said it was a mistake. What do you think?
Look, I was very glad to see her apologize. The comments that she made were extremely troubling, deep-seated, not only against the Secretary of State, but against the gay community. And I was personally offended by that. And I didn't see an apology. But I'm glad that after 2 days, she did come out and she made a very sincere apology. We are all human. We all make mistakes. I think that we have to judge the apology. And I'm very glad that she did a sincere apology, and I think now we can move on.
Is it tough for you to move on?
No, I fail every day. I'm an imperfect person. So I certainly don't judge people on falling. I judge people on getting back up. And I think that's really important. Look, I don't want to equate this to being a cancer survivor, but I do have to say that what you learn when you're faced with physical challenges or any challenges is we are all human. We all are frail. We all fail. And it's always about getting back up. And I'm glad to see when people make mistakes, they own the mistake and they move on, and we all learn from that. And that's exactly how we should treat it.
At the core of her argument, though, against the Secretary of State and the administration, in a bigger sense, Ambassador, was that it was too beholden to the Saudis and the Crown Prince in accepting that they had nothing to do with the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post reporter, when, in fact, almost every other bit of intelligence indicates they were very much involved in it. Does that disturb you that we haven't meted out more punishment for the Saudis, especially when the Senate moved, as it did this past week, to withdraw support for the Saudis in that war in Yemen?
Look, I'm never going to criticize talking heads or journalists for criticizing government officials for policies. If Mika would have had that criticism, exactly the way you put it, about we're not being tough enough, we wouldn't be here talking about her offensive remarks to gay people. Instead, that's what we are doing. So I think we should stick to policy discussions, and there is a lot of room for people to join in and criticize and push their government towards a tougher line or a softer line. Look, I think that the president's policies are exactly where they should be. He's got to balance a whole bunch of issues. He's got to balance human rights. He's got to balance our relationship in the Middle East. We have to have a solid relationship with the Saudis. Anyone who doesn't think that we don't need a solid relationship, a good relationship with the Saudis, is not really understanding the Middle East. So I think these are complicated issues, and we should be able able to have a dual track. We should be able to speak very clearly about violations. When someone is violating human rights, as we've seen in this particular instance, we call it out, and we're very clear on that. But at the same time, you don't always have to abandon policy with that country. I think you can push them privately and publicly to do more and to have an overall better relationship with the United States.
Well, on that count, Lindsey Graham disagrees with you, Ambassador, disagrees with President Trump, with whom he mostly agrees on a host of other issues, including the latest dust-ups that are coming out of Bob Mueller's office. But his view was it's unequivocal that the Saudis had a role in the killing of this journalist, and we cannot let it go by. And as long as this prince is in power, we shouldn't let it go by. You say?
Look, I think that the evidence is clear, and it's very frightening. We have to get to the bottom of all the facts, and whoever is responsible must be punished. There's no question about that.
All right, Ambassador Grinnell, very good seeing you. I hope you have a Merry Christmas. All right, I like that couple of second delay so it can sink in, the Merry Christmas part. All right, we have a lot coming up here. You know, investors are worrying right now, and if I told you the trade tiff with China, that wasn't the big issue. It was more the fact that China and its economy could... I want to take you live to Paris right now. These are demonstrations that are continuing, I believe, for the 5th straight week. The ones in the yellow jackets are not the authorities. They're the ones trying to get away from authorities. That yellow jacket movement really is sort of an embodiment of the protest against some government efforts to try to raise money to fight climate change. Other things are reining on entitlement programs and the like. And this movement, as much of the French people, don't really like it. They're being pushed back. They don't like it. They don't see that the concessions that Emmanuel Macron has made to them by rescinding a tax to fight climate change, among other things, is enough, and that they're still suffering mightily, and they want to see the government do more. But right now, those folks in the yellow jackets are up against the authorities that be to say what he's done ain't enough. I don't know what French is for ain't enough, but apparently it is not enough. All right, so we're keeping an eye on that. One of the many, many uncertainties weighing on the markets is say, look at that Santa part of the protest as well. All right, so what do you make of that? The uncertainty of that, the uncertainty of the Mueller probe, the uncertainty of whether we're going to China deal, mix in with that the fact that we got confirmation that some numbers coming out of China show it could be slipping into at least a slowdown, if not an outright recession, which seems unfathomable, and add that to the same type of economic numbers that are slowing in the likes of France and Germany and Spain and Italy, and on we go. Let's get the read from Fox Business Network's Deirdre Bolton, MaxFunds.com founder Jonas Max Ferris, and the president of Kaufbaum Capital, Gary Kaufbaum. Gary, a lot of uncertainty here.
Uncertainties on uncertainty, and it's now everywhere. You know, talk about the Mueller probe. I will tell you, when the market's strong, I don't think it matters much. You have a fragile market now, and I believe you do have fragile economies in many places around the globe. Germany just contracted, and that is the engine of Europe. I think Europe is going to be contracting over the next couple of quarters, and it feeds on itself. Add in China. I think they only have about $14 trillion economy. That's not just slowing. I think it's slowing markedly, and I think you're going to see the numbers coming down, and we are not going to be immune, and that is the big problem as we move forward.
You know, Gary has been mentioning, Deirdre, that we're in a bear market here. Now, many will disagree respectfully, sometimes not respectfully with Gary, but
True.
Is there a sense that you're getting from traders that the one thing they didn't see happening beyond getting a trade deal with China, yay or nay, is that China itself is in trouble?
I think there were people prepared for it, and when we started talking about the trade tensions earlier in this year, there were a lot of people saying, listen, China is actually going to feel this more than the U.S. So there was a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction to say, oh yeah, we're fine because China's going to feel it more. But to Gary's point, we are so interconnected, all of us now, that it is going to become a problem for us with this 1-2 punch of China slowing, which it clearly is. Whether, I mean, exactly what level and what data points are hard to know from them, but from our analysts here, they're seeing the same thing. And then that Eurozone PMI, which speaks to manufacturing, I mean, that was at a
purchasing managers.
Yeah, and that was at a multi-year low as well. So to your point, Asia slowing, Europe slowing, no matter how great our businesses are doing here, listen, we're trying to sell all of those places our stuff. So it's not great for our businesses.
You could flip it around, Jonas, right, and say, all right, if they're hurting, money has to find a place, and it would find a place here.
It has found a place here. here in the sense that it's one of the reasons our interest rates have come down recently. Part of that is fears of an inflation, which everyone seems to want to happen at this point. But a lot of its money is coming out of these weaker foreign markets that are questionable. China, particularly, to the point you're just bringing up, it's possible we push that country into a recession in this trade war. There's an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal this weekend about how that's basically what happened to Japan in the 80s. We started a trade war with them. We had the trade imbalance with them. They were cheating. They were copying some manufacturing stuff. And we basically brought down the value of our currency, added tariffs. And that was the end. They had a bubble, it crashed, and they've been in a 20-year slump. And there's probably some fears now that could be China's future, that we've just taken out our number 2 economy.
China can do more, and actually the government is investing more, like directly. So they have some more tools, right, that Japan didn't at the time. But yeah, I saw that article, and that was a little bit spooky.
I see the biggest problem is every country around the globe missed a golden opportunity over the last few years with strong economic growth, and that is to work on debt and deficits. Instead, they bloated them higher and higher and higher, enabled by these central banks who I think are just completely insane. And when economies turn down, guess what happens to debt and deficits? They really start going up, and that weighs on markets also and provide a headwind for the economy. And I think I mentioned to you yesterday, a lot of bonds in the United States that were above junk have been downgraded into junk over the last 2-3 months, and I think there's a lot more to come for that because of what we're seeing.
But Gary, it's possible that our central bank was the most insane, to your point, of all, because we're the ones that started to tighten too much. Like, we had this super strong economy in the world, and we needed higher rates, and the president noticed that the rates were going too high, and that's what really started this bear market you think that we're in. Was rates got up to about 3.25 in the 10-year, and then all of a sudden mortgages went too high, the real estate market got weak. It started a lot of problems. Other economies are still in semi-stimulus mode, and we might have overreacted, got too hawkish, and that kind of dovetails into the fears about the president right now, which is it was his mistake. He's the one who got rid of the dove Fed person. He got this hawk in there.
Well, but he did put the Federal Reserve in a tough position, right? I mean, one way or the other, the Fed hikes next week. I mean, they're going to look like they're trying to
either
spike
way,
the
it's damned
right?
if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, the Fed cannot do anything right.
Does everyone think it's a given the Fed